Beyond that, it's hazy. I don't remember much else. I think that Ben Carson was an influence when I was younger, and it's kind of a shame to me to see what he's become.
Interesting direction he's chosen to go with this.
Interesting. I think heartbreaking.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's another word. That's another word.
Yeah, but I remember in 8th grade reading Healing Hands, and it was the first real life example I had of a Black male physician. You know, I had family medicine doctors, I had, dentists, but none of them were Black men. And it was particularly valuable for me to see a Black man who devoted his life to science and built an entire how should I put this? I think what was really impressive about it was not only that he built a life through science and found a way to support his family and a way to keep himself stimulated, but he knew, if you read the book, like you understand that he acknowledges that his story is inspirational. And I like the fact that he decided to write a book, and it felt like there was a connection between him at Johns Hopkins, this world-renowned neurosurgeon, and me, like a 13-year-old Black kid in Miami, with a single parent, and living in a place that looked forgotten.
Miami, that is your neighborhood.
Right, exactly. And it made me think that maybe my environment wasn't all that different from the Detroit that he grew up in as a kid.
It sounds like it opened up your mind to other options.
For sure. And frankly, Bill Cosby and the Bill Cosby Show.
Another guy.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Controversial.
Interesting turn of events with him as well.
Heartbreaking too. Heartbreaking.
Yeah. I'll go with that.
Although he was at my college graduation.
Really?
So I went to Princeton for undergraduate, and he was at my graduation. And there's something about him. There was something about him that I heard. There was an interview with Lisa Bonet, and she said that he always had something like, I think she said like an evil energy or some kind of energy that was off-putting. Even from a distance at my graduation, I kind of understand that. I get what she was talking about.
Oh, you mean you could tell something was kind of off with him.
Yeah, exactly. Like he seemed, I'll give you an example. The president of the university and Bill Cosby were having this back and forth on a hot mic about sunlight exposure and how hot it was that day. And Bill Cosby said, "Oh, it looks like you got the Negroes out in the sun." And, for me sitting in the crowd at graduation, this might have been the day before graduation, actually. It was off-putting because there are very few Black people who get to go to Princeton. And it kind of, in just the use of the word Negro, it's kind of something that,
the way it was said.
Exactly. Like that's something that's perhaps a comment better saved for when we're together rather than in mixed company.
Yeah.
Right. And so he said that, and then the president responds, "Oh, well, I must be a mulatto." He's not. He was a white man.
Mulatto?
Yeah. He said, "Well, I must be a mulatto because I'm half in the sun and half out." And it was a cringeworthy experience. I remember listening to that and disliking both of them immediately.
Yeah.
And it was tough for me because Bill Cosby for me was a deeply inspirational figure when I was a kid, and just seeing the quality of his show and that idealized version of Black family life was really important for me. A kid who grew up in a fractured family, seeing kind of an idealization of Black success and Black connectedness and Black love was really, really important.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is where we're getting into a discussion about heroes and role models.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there have been a lot of role models and I guess you could say heroes that in the African-American community that have fallen from grace.
Yeah.
You know, it's very important to have those role models, but unfortunately, when you get to know some of them really behind the scenes, it's not quite what you idealize them to be.
No. And frankly, I think that the longstanding sense in our community that the margin for error for us is much slimmer.
Yeah.
Still holds. That's not me saying that these men were taken down or women were taken down by design, but I do think that there's a double standard for behavior. I think that for members of our community who commit crimes or do egregious things, yeah, they should be punished, but it should be equal.
Yeah.
Right.
Equal. And, you know, the other thought behind that is it hurts us a little bit more when they fall.
Right.
And what I mean by that is it's not as though African-American men, Hispanic men, or, you know, white and Caucasian men, they all have flaws. Everybody has flaws. But unfortunately for us, our role models are a little bit more important because, as you mentioned yourself, seeing Ben Carson, who took an interesting turn, but at that point in your life when you saw him as somebody that you could look up to and respect, it might have changed your entire life around.
Yeah, Carson hopped the fence. He's, you know, he put on a different uniform. So.
I have not heard from him in many, many years, but yeah, I know.
Yeah. So I think, you know, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah. Well, at the top of the show, what we were talking about was the fact that you are not only tall, but you're also African-American and a child psychiatrist.
Yeah.
There is a shortage of psychiatrists and child psychiatrists, and definitely minority child psychiatrists.
Yeah, it's a real crisis. It's sort of, I think that is sort of, it is a crisis that doesn't get a lot of attention. And I also think the increasing rates of mental illness and suicide among Black youth is also something that doesn't get a lot of attention. So in the United States, as of 2016, roughly 70% of counties in the U.S. had no child psychiatrist. Child psychiatrists tend to move to densely populated areas of high income.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're not fortunate enough to live in an area like that, you're probably not going to have access to a child psychiatrist.
Right. Have you been on ACAP's website recently?
I'm actually not a member of the APA or ACAP anymore.
So neither one. Is there a reason behind that?
I didn't like their response to institutional racism. I thought it was milquetoast. I thought it was delayed. And I actually prefer the American Psychological Association's response. It was, you know, after George Floyd, they came out with a statement pretty rapidly. And they didn't pull any punches about systemic racism.
So was it the George Floyd incident when you stopped?
Probably around that time. Might have been 20. I think I might have paid at the beginning of the year. And then in 2021, I didn't.
You just don't. You don't deal with them much anymore.
No.
Would you ever come back if they changed their ways or new leadership?
I'm not much of a joiner.
Got it.
You know, I kind of, as I get older, I kind of realize I'm not really much of a joiner.
You're already out.
Yeah, I just like to, you know, do my practice, work on my books, and, you know, kind of do my own thing.
Well, never mind that. So I will show you then the graph.
Okay.
So if you look at this chart, and I literally just looked at it this morning. Let me find the best way to because I know I took a picture of it. Oh, there it is. Okay, I have it. I took a screenshot of that.
Okay.
You look at that map. The orange is all the states in the United States with I think it's a severe shortage.
Okay.
That's the states.
Yeah.
You look at the chart below that. That's the counties. You mentioned that earlier. In the red, all that red there is a county.
No caps.
With no caps.
Yep. That's the 70%.
That's insane.
Yeah. Yeah. Unsurprising. I think that, frankly, medical schools do a piss poor job of getting people excited about psychiatry.
I was going to ask you about that.
Oh, for sure.
What is the reason for this?
Yeah, I've wondered that for a long time. When I talk to people who are in their 70s, who are psychiatrists, they tell me that psychiatry was like the hot profession when they were in medical school.
Really?
Yeah, because they were coming out of the 60s era. And I think that expanding your consciousness and using medications with psychedelic properties or mind-altering drugs, rather, was something that was really exciting. And it was something that the government was experimenting with, too.
Kind of like now.
Yeah, sort of, yeah.
Kind of like now.
Except I don't think, there may be. Actually, I've read some things over the past few years that suggest that there is a kind of a rising tide of interest in psychiatry among recent medical graduates.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah. Why the shift? I don't know exactly. But I know that when I was in medical school, there was, where I went to medical school in New York at a place called Mount Sinai, which, again, doesn't exist because it's been rebranded to something else. And it's called the Icahn School of Medicine.
That's Icahn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Another Princeton guy also. So when I was there, the exposure to psychiatry you got was not good. You either went to the VA, which is like going to a penal institution, because it's what they typically call a psychiatric intensive care unit, like the inpatient wards at VA hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
And it's scary. You know, not so much for me at the time, but female colleagues, they would actually tell me about the dread they would feel working on the wards because the men were physically assaultive sometimes,
Yes.
verbally assaultive often. And you look around, there's no armed guard. It's just a bunch of staff members walking around in scrubs that are supposed to control these men who've all been trained in martial arts, good with weapons. And plus, they're not in full possession of their mental faculties. So it's a dangerous environment to be in. So you get exposure to that. And I think that that's probably not something that would generate much interest in most people who spent the great majority of their life studying really, really hard in order to perhaps have a more enjoyable existence after that.
Yeah.
So I don't think many people were really excited about the prospect of going to work at a place like that every day.
Yeah.
Then, short of that, I'm trying to think where else they put us. I think, let's see, there was the VA. Actually, now that I think about it, I think the VA was my only exposure to psychiatry.
Oh, what?
Yeah, that was it.
That's it?
Yeah, I did. Let's see. I think I got to sit in someone's private practice on Park Avenue
Okay.
for like maybe a week.
Okay. That's still not a lot.
Got to hear some stories. I don't think any patients came in. I think he scheduled me. He was a great guy. He was this child psychiatrist. He looked like he was about 100 years old.
Right.
But really nice guy. And he was kind of a stereotypical kind of Hollywood psychiatrist, had a heavy European accent. I think he was from Austria or something. So he was like out of central casting.
All right.
So it was me and him, and he was great. Like, he was very encouraging and very supportive, and I really appreciated the time that he devoted, but we didn't talk about the real work of it. And it was clear that, he had the beautiful office, he'd had a career, probably had an apartment not too far away, but his professional life was about done. So I didn't really run into anyone who was in psychiatry who I could really model myself after. In fact, I don't think I ran into many people in medical school who were really good models for me. I ran into maybe one or two surgeons who seemed cool, but they had lifestyles that I just couldn't wrap my mind around.
In a good way or a bad way?
In a bad way. Surgery is very demanding.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are lifestyle practices in different surgical subspecialties. But the surgical subspecialists that I worked with, well into their 50s, were still working very hard, long hours. I would say easily 60, 70 hours a week in New York at the time. And of course, again, that's not me generalizing to all surgeons like working everywhere, but the surgeons that I worked with when I was in medical school, really, I don't know how they were able to balance that with having a family and, personal interests. It really, the best advice I got when I was rotating through surgery as a medical student was from a surgeon who said, if there's anything else in life you think you might want to do, don't do surgery. And I don't know how true that is because I didn't become a surgeon,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that the training's very demanding, and I think the practice can be very demanding too, depending on what you want to do. And these were academic surgeons in New York for the most part, so I don't know. Yeah, take it for what you will. Medical schools do a piss poor job, in my experience, of exposing young people to the positive aspects of psychiatry.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many. I think one of the major positive aspects is that if you're an entrepreneur, you can go into business for yourself almost immediately after you're done training. It's very low overhead, and you can be your own boss. And there are some fantastic entrepreneurs in this field. Fantastic business people. So
I'm looking at one.
That's one. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm working on it. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is you have to see people get better as a medical student, because I think that's what's so attractive about surgical specialties in general, is that someone comes in with appendicitis, they go into the OR, it's maybe a 40-minute procedure once everyone's set up, probably faster than that. And I'd say 40 minutes, including cleanup and getting the patient out. Someone has an appendicitis, you take out the appendix, you stitch them up, and they go home. That's satisfying. It is. I don't know if it's satisfying when you've done 10,000 of them, but I think that when you're young and you're doing procedures like that, it's probably deeply gratifying. I had friends from medical school, became different types of surgeons, and I know one of them in particular, who's an eye surgeon, loves surgery, but I think he hates the business of medicine now. He went into private practice. I won't say which city, but he works 6 days a week. It's just him. And he's incredibly busy, and I'm sure it's a very lucrative practice, but he's working way harder at this age than I think he really wanted to. And because he is responsible and he cares about his patients, I don't think he feels comfortable just cutting back his schedule. So, and plus, he's under the thumb of insurance companies, which is another advantage of psychiatry that I suspect a lot of people don't realize, is that if you don't want to take insurance, you don't have to take insurance. You can build up your own practice. It takes longer, but you can build a practice without the insurance companies. And in medicine, that's rare. I think that apart from psychiatry, maybe if you're a very well-known plastic surgeon, you could do that. And you also have a great deal of skill. But in many other specialties, it's really hard. I think primary care doctors try to do a boutique practice model. But again, you're very limited as to where you can practice if you do that. For psychiatry, you can open up a practice without insurance virtually anywhere in the country. As long as you price it in a reasonable way and you're willing to devote a lot of time and effort into building it up, you can do that. So I think that what would help on the medical school side, maybe some medical schools are doing this today, but many were not when I was going through, letting medical students actually have exposure to successful private practice models, where not everyone is dealing with sort of the equivalent of a 5-alarm fire in terms of mental illness, where you do have successful people coming in from different walks of life who are dealing with more relatable varieties or severities of mental illness, rather than people that I remember seeing in medical school at the VA who were all severely mentally ill. These were people who were very likely going to be dependent on that institution or some sort of public system for care and support the rest of their lives.
For life, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. No, I definitely understand that. Yeah. I also think that the stigma of mental illness and being a psychiatrist is actually going away as well.
Very much so.
Yeah.
In fact, I met with one of my patients who hails from the Middle East just a few days ago, and this patient was explaining how even in their country, which today is really a theocracy, that there's really the stigma among people their age regarding mental health doesn't really exist anymore.
Yeah.
People speak openly about seeing a psychiatrist there or a therapist in the way that they wouldn't have 15 or 20 years ago.
I think there's last year, or at least 2 years ago, there were more applicants than there were spots.
Wow. among domestic applicants.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, yeah, that's a very good sign.
Now, I could be wrong about that, but either way, I'm positive the stigma of being a psychiatrist, because that was back in the day, being a psychiatrist was not the thing to do. It was sort of like how back when I was younger too, the only doctors I was aware of was the ones that were on ER.
Right.
And you with Dr. Carson, we only saw what was on TV and what was sort of idealized as what the doctor should look like.
Right.
Psychiatrists don't fall under that category, at all.
Speaking of ER, there was a black doctor on ER who played the surgeon. Seemed like a very cool dude. I couldn't relate to him. He seemed like too stiff and formal for me.
Was he also in Coming to America?
Yes.
Yeah, I know you're talking about.
Yeah, that one. I don't know his name. Great actor.
Yeah.
Very handsome man. Seems like he'd be very cool to know, just in general. But I just couldn't relate to him.
Dr. Benton, I think.
Yes, Benton, I think. Dr. Benton. So, yeah, I think that they played up kind of the troubled aspects of his existence a little too much, so that like he just seems socially disconnected from people, work. And I knew too many doctors like that, or I would come to know too many doctors like that in real life. So that wasn't a model that really resonated with me.
Now that you bring, the storyline that I remember the most was what was his name? He was in the show House.
Omar Epps.
Omar Epps.
Yeah.
You remember his character? What happened with him?
Vaguely. I wasn't a big House fan, even though I'm a very big Sherlock Holmes fan.
No, not House, on ER.
He was on ER?
Okay, Dr. Benton had him as a surgical resident.
Oh, I do remember that. Right. Boy, that's way back. That's like 94.
I remember.
Oh, that's way back.
I was watching.
That's old school. Yeah.
I was watching rated R.
Jeez.
Rated R movies, all the intense shows back in the day.
You sound like a latchkey kid like me.
Yeah. Well, for the most part, although I never left the house. Anyway.
Yeah, hey, it's a good thing you didn't come off the porch, man. There's some bad things that happen when you come off the porch.
Yeah. At some point, I'm going to do a solo episode talking about how introverts are going to inherit the earth. I will talk about that.
It started already. It started, man. I work with a lot of neurodiverse people.
Yeah.
It started already.
Yeah. We go get into that too, I think. Yeah. So that storyline, the reason why I brought it up and I've never forgotten it.
I just want to, one comment. Dick Gregory predicted that.
What's that?
That neurodiverse people would inherit the earth.
Did he?
A very long time ago, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to need you to show me where you. I'll incorporate that into my episode.
Yeah.
The reason why I remember that storyline so much is because Dr. Benton's character was the mentor for Omar Epps' character.
Okay.
And if you remember how that ended,
he was very hard on him, wasn't he?
Why was he hard on him?
Yeah. Well, I think it was the model minority thing.
Yeah.
Right.
As black tax
sort
of thing where you have to do twice as much to get twice as far.
Right. Yeah.
So he pushed him too hard and
or just as far, I think. You have to.
Excuse me, just as far.
Just as far.
Thank you for that correction.
I wish. We wouldn't need to talk about any of this. If
the return on investment is not always the same.
Yes.
But he pushed him twice as hard as he did everyone else. And that did not end well.
Yeah.
So that's why that stood out to me. But anyway. Okay. So we're talking about the shortage of child and adolescent psychiatrists, which I'll probably post it somewhere to get access to the picture of it so people can see it. But it's basically red across the country in most parts of the country.
Yeah.
Do you have any ideas as to what, and we're talking about child and adolescent psychiatrists, as to what might be something outside of, because once they graduate, is there a way that you can think of people to actually move into these rural areas?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Pay off their medical school loans. Medical debt. When I was in medical school, like 17 years ago, if you had 6 figures in debt, that was considered to be a large amount of debt. If you had like $100,000 in debt, that was considered to be a lot for medical school. These young people are graduating with $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 in debt.
The highest I've heard is 6.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Back when I was in medical school, the only people who had debt at that level were people who were like 40 years old going to medical school and had gone the post-baccalaureate route and had gone to these super expensive post-baccalaureate programs. So those are the only people I knew carrying that kind of debt when I was in medical school. Now it sounds like it's nearly routine for people to carry low to mid 6-figure debt. And of course, if that's the case, then you're going to have a world full of, I'm guessing, radiologists, neurosurgeons, whatever people think is procedure oriented and will reimburse very, very well. When in truth, what I think isn't taught to people in medical school is that the economics, you have to be careful with the economics of specialties. Because if you're in a specialty that has an attractive looking annual average income, you need to break those numbers down and really think in terms of work hours and RVUs. RVUs are relative value units, and those are units that are determined by the Center for Medicare and Medicaid. And basically, the powers that be at that center decide how much each unit of work for a doctor doing a certain type of procedure is worth. Now, I'm sure you follow this. I don't know if many other people who are going to listen to this are also following what's happening in Washington, but our government's insolvent. We have a debt crisis. There is not enough in the Treasury to provide public health insurance or public income, Social Security, for people who are going to be the next generation of the aged. There's just not going to be enough money there.
Yeah.
And so as a consequence, the government's going to have to cut corners. Where are they going to cut corners? They're going to look at Medicare and Medicaid. And this is a complaint that you'll hear from people in certain specialties like radiology that complain of declining reimbursements. So if you talk to radiologists, they'll tell you that reimbursements have been declining for probably more than 10 years. But the reason why the salaries might look the same or even grow year to year is because they're probably reading more films.
Volume.
Yeah, exactly. Volume goes up. Yeah, and that's how you keep those salary numbers attractive. So I think that anyone coming out of medical school right now needs to think carefully about whether they want to go into a specialty that is closely tied to public insurance. Because if that's the case, whatever you're expecting in terms of income might not be all that predictable, because a lot of that's going to have to do with what's going on in Washington.
Yeah. And I think that's one reason why psych, because you already mentioned the entrepreneurship, the work-life balance, and the lack of stigma. That's increasing, in my opinion. You've already hit those points. I don't need to go over them.
Right.
Why psych is becoming more attractive to medical school students.
Right.
Now, what I'm concerned about is, and I'll be pessimistic here, I'm usually a very optimistic person.
Okay.
Or at least a realist.
Yeah.
So maybe this is realism, what I'm about to say here. NYU is right now funding.
Oh, I heard about this.
You know about this, right? So I'm watching. I can't remember exactly how many years ago they started paying off the tuition, but I want to see what those students go into and where they move. And I hope they track it, because I'm not confident that even without the student loan debt,
it'll help. It'll help a lot. And I say that based solely on a very small sample. That's the people I went to medical school with.
I'll believe you.
And I went to school with many very, very talented people, super bright, like concert pianists who were also AOA, like very, very talented people who could have gone into any specialty. But it's funny, it seems that in many of the cases that I remember, the hardest working, most talented people in medical school really just kind of followed their heart. Like if they came in to medical school because they were really interested in radiation oncology, they did radiation oncology. If they came into medical school and they were really into psychiatry and did really well in medical, they went to psychiatry. If they were really into internal medicine, they went into internal medicine or a subspecialty. And it's really interesting. Like those types of people are really fascinating because I think people on the outside looking in are a little confused. They're like, well, if you're the best in your class, why don't you just do the thing that pays the most? But that's not why everyone goes into medicine.
I agree with that.
Right. Yeah. There are many true believers who go into medicine because they really get excited about doing a certain type of work. And I think that what's good about what NYU's doing, which is covering its tuition that they're covering.
I believe so.
Yeah. By covering the tuition for admitted students based on need, I'm pretty sure.
No, I think it's everyone.
Oh, really? That's fantastic.
I think everyone just gets free tuition.
That's fantastic. I think you will see, freed of that burden, a handful, maybe 2 handfuls, more people per year going to primary care specialties.
Okay.
So obstetrics and gynecology, family medicine, internal medicine.
We need to track that Because that's important.
I'm sure they are at NYU. I'd be shocked if they weren't.
But I want to see the numbers. I want to see it.
You could too.
I'm the most important person to know these numbers, right?
You could too. Well, you got a podcast, that's for sure. And someone has to be reporting this kind of thing to the general public so that kids in high school can begin to understand, like, oh, wait a minute. So there are schools where you can go and be free of medical school debt. Then why not? Like, I've always dreamt of being a family medicine doctor in a small town. Why not do that?
It just takes a lot of donations from very, very rich and affluent people to make it happen.
Yeah. I don't mind billionaires burnishing their reputations by giving, whatever it takes, hundreds of millions to medical schools so that medical students can graduate without debt. I think that's fantastic.
I do too.
Yeah, that's actually one of the best uses to the obscene wealth that people are able to accumulate these days that I can think of, especially in an environment where there's incredibly unfair taxation when it comes to income generated from trading.
From trading stocks and
asset trading, right?
Okay.
As opposed to wage income, right?
So I think what that'll come down to, in order for it to work, recruitment. You're really going to have to make sure that everybody that you bring on or into medical, because everyone says the same thing in medical school, but I don't know how you verify that this person is actually committed to underserved populations.
I hear what you're saying, but you know what? I mean, if you look at the match list for most medical schools, for the ones that I've seen over the past 10 or 15 years, what are the most common specialties?
It's not psych, surgery, internal med.
Yeah. Stop there. Yeah, full stop. And I think psychiatry usually comes in third, maybe fourth.
From the top?
Yeah, it's usually
in primary care specialties.
Right, because there are no, just in general, because on some of these lists, as you get into the how should I put it? So like there are only going to be a few people a year who are really interested in going into otolaryngology. Like, you're not going to have like dozens of people in a class.
Right. There's not that many spots for that to happen. Anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you will find like 8, 10, 15 people might go into psychiatry one
Gotcha.
day. Yeah. Because it's kind of one of those general interest specialties, and there are a lot of fellowships you can do. And frankly, even where I trained, the adult program is so much better than when I was there. Like the residents now, they can do study abroad while they're in residency.
Oh yeah, work-life balance in
amazing.
Residency is it's changed.
They don't have to do like a grueling. I'm trying to remember how many months of internal medicine I did. I think I did 6.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, it was nuts.
It's the requirement. But I think we still had 6 too. But it's the way they structure it is different.
Yeah, I think so. I think that a few years after I finished, they started allowing the psych interns to do more outpatient internal medicine. Like, I remember my first month on internal medicine, I had a patient with, oh my gosh, shingles, HIV, diabetes.
Everything.
Yeah. Heart disease, high cholesterol, a bunch of things all at once. I had a resident who called it sticker shock when he was trying to encourage me, like, not to get anxious about seeing patients like this. Because when you go to the ER to admit these people and you open their record for the first time, you see pages of diagnoses and pages of medications. And when you're new, and when I was an intern, I was like 27. Yeah, I think I was 27 years old. I was just shaking my head. I was like, what am I supposed to do with this?
Right.
Like, I actually took a year off after medical school, so I was rusty too.
Right.
So I remember thinking, like, how am I supposed to help people like this?
Right.
And you get better at it the longer you do it, as you know. But I think about the utility of that for someone who ended up doing what I do. Very limited.
Exactly.
I would have been much better off working with probably outpatient family medicine, outpatient primary care clinic. I think I had to do a paracentesis once, or I think I had to do that.
That you'll never do again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, to what end?
Yeah,
to what end? Like, to what end? If I run into a patient with ascites, I'm going to refer them back to their internal medicine doctor, who will hopefully put them in the hospital.
Yeah.
Right.
My takeaway from seeing all that, because I've seen it's LA County and I did medical school in Jackson.
Yeah.
Anybody from Miami knows about Jackson. Much love to them. But you'll see that list of.
That's my home hospital, man.
Yeah, you know Jackson.
I was born in Jackson.
You were born in Jackson?
Yeah, man.
Wow. I should have guessed it. Jackson takes care of that whole
I'm
area.
I'm from the muck, man. I'm rooted.
Jackson takes care of that whole area in South Florida.
It does, man.
Yeah.
And funny side note, I actually went to high school with the grandson of the founder of that hospital, whose dad was a prominent orthopedic surgeon.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's not a big area down there in South Florida.
Right.
It's not that big. It's dense.
It's super dense, but the city of Miami is pretty small. I think it's like 8 square miles.
There's a lot of people, but it's not a big city.
No, not at all.
But my one takeaway from seeing all those diagnoses is that I can see how much we don't really. A lot of those diagnoses are preventable with lifestyle changes, diet,
for sure,
exercise, education, and we don't really do that in our healthcare system, which kind of goes back to our issues with, payment and reimbursement.
Right, and again, recruitment.
Yeah.
You need more young people interested in going into internal medicine, going into family medicine, going to obstetrics and gynecology.
Yeah. All right. What are your plans for the future?
That's a good question.
Business-wise, I don't know. You don't have to talk about personal, but
professionally. Yeah. Well, I'd like to be on a beach somewhere sooner rather than later.
All right.
Just kicking my heels up.
Yeah.
So hopefully before the year's over, I'll be doing something like that.
Okay.
So I have a lot of work to do. I have 2 offices. I have one in Beverly Hills. I've got one in San Mateo, and they occupy a lot of my time. And there's a lot to do there. I'm working on more community outreach, giving more public talks or talks to certain groups, like groups of therapists or psychologists in different cities. And I've got a book that I'm working on, which has to do with adolescent addiction, and hoping to get that out sometime next year.
Can't wait.
Yeah, neither can I. I can stop working on it. So.
All right, so how do people find you?
Yeah, so the practice website is www.reneamed, RENAIMED. And also the social media is going to be at Renaissance Behavioral Medicine.
Okay. Telephone number people can call or?
Sure. So if you're in the Bay Area, that's going to be 650-206-8932. And if you are in LA, it is going to be 213-262-0888. We're always happy to help.
All right. Well, I think I have taken up enough of your time. You have given us a lot of great information.
Pleasure being here.
I appreciate you stopping by. Yep. Can we go eat?
Yeah, let's go eat.
Yes. Time to eat. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. No supervision. Signing off.
Pleasure being here.
Bye-bye.